Thank you, Felix, and thanks especially to all of you for showing up tonight. When people come into my presentations, they typically don't know what they're in for, and I don't know any way to provide full disclosure without providing full disclosure about what I'm going to say. So the best analogy I can come up with is an asteroid. If there's an asteroid headed at Earth, and we know when it's going to strike, we know that it is going to strike, and we know when it is going to strike. Some people want to know. That's me. And since I want to know, I assume everybody wants to know. But if you don't want to know about the asteroid, you might want to leave now. Because we have triggered events with respect to climate change that will cause loss of all habitat for our species in the not very distant future. And I'd like to start with a little video clip that I might be able to figure out how to get up on the screen. There it is. Look at me go. Almost a miracle. Alright. This little video clip tells the whole story with respect to individual lives of my message. So I really like that I can tell the whole story in only 45 seconds. Is that the one? Whew. I'm exhausted already just from moving the little thing around. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is perhaps the most conservative scientific body on the planet. In their latest assessment, their fifth assessment, the IPCC concluded that global warming is irreversible without massive geoengineering of Earth's atmosphere. This is quite an admission from an organization that in all five of its assessments, including this one, has been saying that we need to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And every year we've set a new record for carbon dioxide emissions. They've been telling us for longer than some people in this room have been alive, more than 27 years now, that we have to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And now they say that global warming is irreversible in the absence of massive geoengineering of the atmosphere's chemistry. An approach that Truth Out correctly labels fantasy technology. Since the IPCC report was leaked in September 2013, there have been at least 5 scientific journal articles pointing out that geoengineering is a prescription for continued disaster, worse disaster than we have observed so far with respect to climate change. Really, this should say the history of humans. But I'm going with the misogynistic approach because that's what the cartoonist did. This is the story of our species. It's pretty much the same story as it is for individuals. So the little 50-second video clip shows about our whole lives, which is short. And the same applies at the level of our species. Life is short for us as individuals. Life is short for us as a species. This universe has existed for roughly 13.8 billion years. Our species, Homo sapiens, has been here for about 200,000 years. If my wingspan represents the history of the universe, let me try that? Yeah. If this is the history of the universe, then Homo sapiens showed up for the last few cells on the end of my finger. And we think it's all about us. Right? The universe is built just for humans, but in fact, we just got here. We just showed up, like yesterday, from a cosmological perspective. So we showed up just in time to ask what the hell is happening at the end. I'm going to propose that human extinction will result from climate change. We have never had humans on the planet. The entire 2.8 million years of the genus Homo has never seen global average temperature at 3.3 degrees centigrade or higher. Highest temperature experienced by humans so far has been during the Eemian, during which global average temperature rose to 3.2 degrees above baseline in a span of thousands of years. Baseline is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, approximately 1750. 1750 is when we started burning fossil fuels at scale. Mostly with coal early on, then switching to oil and ultimately natural gas, and now switching back to coal as oil increasingly becomes difficult to find. We're headed for a global average temperature of at least 3.5 degrees above baseline in the very near future. And human extinction will result not from the rise in temperature per se, not directly. I mean, we've experienced more than a 3.5 degree rise in temperature coming from outside to inside. And we're all doing just fine. I mean, except for these 3 young people I talked to before the thing started tonight, and they're kind of depressed about the whole thing. But everybody else is doing fine. Our body temperatures are perfectly capable of adapting. We can put on clothes, we can take off clothes, we can turn on the heat, we can turn on the air conditioning. We have this technology, including these clothes, which allow us to adapt to various temperatures. But plants don't. Native animals don't. Already, with a very slow rise in global average temperature over the last 200 years, already global warming is outpacing evolution by natural selection for plants and animals by a factor of 10,000. Plants and native animals cannot keep up with the rate of change, so they're dying. And so far, the rate of change has been quite slow. If we trigger a sudden rise in temperature over a short period of time, that's going to outstrip the ability of plants to adapt by a factor of 250,000 times or more. Plants can't keep up already. Plants are dying everywhere. And without plants, we die. We don't have food. Food's great. Food is one of the best things ever. And without it, we're going to have a tough time. So, we are human animals, and like every other animal and every other plant on this planet, we need habitat to survive. I'm going to walk through what I think are the shortest and longest periods during which I suspect we will have habitat for humans on the planet. It could be, I'm making no predictions here, but it could be that the collapse of industrial civilization happens this year. it could be next week for all we know. The system teeters on the brink already. And so it could go at any time. We can't sustain the unsustainable forever. And any set of living arrangements based on infinite growth on a finite planet is doomed to fail. Any set of living arrangements that depends upon fossil fuels to keep going is doomed to fail. So it could be that industrial civilization goes away this year. When it does, not if, but when it does, whether it's this year or next year or the year after, that will lead to a 1.2 plus or minus 0.2 degree temperature rise in a matter of days, according to a paper by James Hansen and colleagues. The reason for that is the particulates put up into the atmosphere as we burn fossil fuels, most notably including sulfates, allow for global dimming. There's a nice documentary about global dimming put out by the BBC, I think 8 years ago. And it's free and available online. The sulfates put up into the atmosphere are constantly falling out of the atmosphere in a matter of a few days. So if we stop putting the sulfates and other reflective particles into the atmosphere, they all fall out in a very short period of time. That leads to a 1.2 plus or minus 0.2 C temperature rise. Now, 2 subsequent papers published after this paper demonstrate that this paper is very conservative. The final one of those papers indicates that a reduction in the industrial activity of only about 1/3 produces a 1 degree temperature rise. So what that means is, if the United States empire collapses, if China stops burning fossil fuels, if the Eurozone goes down in flames, any of those account for about 1/3 of the global average economy. So even a reduction of a relatively small level produces a rapid rise in temperature. And when the whole thing goes down, and it's also interconnected now, that surely when US empire falls, it doesn't take long for everybody else to go to. So when that happens, we've locked in at least a 1.4 degree temperature rise in a short period of time. At least 1.4. It could be as much as 3 or more degrees temperature rise. In addition, I'm going to go off the topic of abrupt climate change for a few moments. In addition, what the collapse of industrial civilization causes is the catastrophic meltdown of the world's 442 nuclear power facilities, each of which requires a lot of money and 50 to 60 years to safely decommission. 50 to 60 years. That's assuming we start working on it right now, and we aren't. And we work very diligently to decommission them. Since we aren't doing that, when industrial civilization falls and nobody goes to work anymore because money becomes worthless, even first responders, such as police officers and fire department and emergency medical technicians, even they stop going to the emergencies after a few days and instead go spend time with their families. A supply disruption of anything significant, according to David Korowicz writing for the FASTA group in the summer of 2012, leads to a collapse of the whole system within 3 weeks, as little as 3 weeks. So a supply disruption in oil, even regionally, a supply disruption in food, food doesn't show up on the grocery store shelves, a supply disruption in water delivery, a supply disruption in credit. It was 2008, September 2008, when the credit almost seized up beyond the point of being repairable. If that happens again, the central banks of the world are just about out of tools to deal with it. And so we could have a seizing up of credit. Any one of those events leads to a loss of industrial industrial activity, including people showing up for work, which means we have 1,200 pools filled with spent fuel rods. The water all runs out, the cooling water all runs out or evaporates off, and then the spent fuel rods are exposed to the air, they explode and produce the kinds of fires this planet has never witnessed, spewing ionizing radiation all over the globe. But since I'm such an optimist, I'm going to start talking about climate change again. According to Natalia Shkova, who has conducted field research in the Arctic for nearly 10 years, according to Natalia Shkova, there is a 50 gigaton abrupt release of methane that is highly possible at any time. If the global average temperature increases in a relatively short period of time by more than 1 degree, there's no way we have ice on the Arctic Ocean this September. In fact, we might not anyway, regardless of what else happens. Every month so far this year, we've set a new record for low ice cover in the Arctic. So we're headed for an ice cover lower than we observed in 2012 when it was almost zero. If there's no ice in the Arctic, I see no way to keep a lid on this 50 gigaton release of methane that is, quote, highly possible at any time. When that happens, that adds conservatively another 1.3 degrees global average temperature. Currently we're at 0.85 degrees above baseline, baseline again being the beginning of the Industrial Revolution when we started burning fossil fuels at scale in about 1750. Collapse of industrial civilization because of global dimming, and more accurately, the loss of global dimming, the removal of the umbrella that shields us from incoming radiation. We get added at least another 1.4 degrees in a matter of days. And then I see no way to keep a lid on that 50 gigaton abrupt release of methane that is highly possible at any time. So that takes us to 3.55, about 1/3 of a degree higher than ever experienced by humans on this planet. So it could be, since more than 3/4 of that temperature rise would occur in less than 18 months, it could be that this alone will be sufficient to remove habitat for humans. Or maybe not. The general consensus among the scientific community, as reported by Oliver Tickell in a 2008 article in The Guardian, was that 4 degrees causes extinction. In fact, the title of the article is, "At 4C, all we can plan for is extinction." I'm not sure how you plan for extinction. That was the consensus until 2008, maybe even until 2012. But once it became obvious that 4C was guaranteed, it's already locked into the system because of the lag between carbon dioxide entering the atmosphere and the maximum heating associated with that temperature. Because of the lag, 4 degrees is locked in. It's guaranteed, according to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and many, many other organizations. Because of that, maybe it'll take 4C in a short period of time to guarantee extinction. Now, since 4C is locked in, mainstream climate scientists have backed up and said, no, 4C is not the number, it must be 5. Because we know 4 is guaranteed, so it must be something higher than that. This is called moving the goalposts, or the shifting baseline. So it could be that 3.55 won't do the trick in a short period of time. So I want to talk about one of many self-reinforcing feedback loops that are irreversible over spans of thousands of years. I'm going to talk about methane release from the Arctic Ocean. That 50 gigaton abrupt release of methane, predicted by Natalia Shkova, would be the first of many bursts or abrupt releases of methane from the Arctic Ocean. According to glaciologist and climate scientist Jason Box, who has conducted field research mostly in Greenland for the last several years, if only 1% of the methane hydrates are released from beneath the continental shelves in the Arctic Ocean. If only 1% of those are released, he says, and I quote, we're fucked. 1% of the clathrates. Clathrates are chemical bonds, chemical cages around methane molecules. Methane is CH4. You know it as natural gas. Use it to heat your water or heat your homes. When the chemical bond warms, it breaks and releases CH4 or methane into the water column or into the atmosphere. So I'm going to talk about methane release from the Arctic Ocean, first reported in the scientific literature in August 2009. And so this is the irreversible self-reinforcing feedback loop we know the most about. By self-reinforcing feedback loop, I mean the snowball that rolls down a hill. And as it rolls, it picks up more snow. It becomes bigger, it becomes weightier, it rolls faster, and the faster it rolls, the more snow it picks up, and it just keeps going faster. The faster it goes, the faster it's able to go, and so the faster it goes. Methane release from the Arctic Ocean, of course, once it's released into the atmosphere, that further warms the atmosphere. Methane has more than 100 times more heating potential than carbon dioxide, molecule for molecule. More than 100 times. So a little bit of release into the atmosphere, the ocean warms, especially in the Arctic. The Arctic is already warming many times faster than the global average. A little bit more methane release, it gets hotter. As it gets hotter, more methane is released. As more methane is released, it gets hotter. You can see where this is going. First reported in August 2009, subsequently reported in several other scientific outlets. It took until September 2012 in a paper in Global Policy by Michael Jennings to conclude that the process is irreversible and that this is one of several self-reinforcing feedback loops or positive feedbacks. So the scientific community is very conservative. The journal process is very conservative, so it takes a long time for the science to catch up with reality. By July 2013, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration of the United States reports with their CARVE project methane plumes up to 150 kilometers across in the Arctic Ocean. These data were collected by satellite. They couldn't be collected directly because if you're in a sailing ship and you're in the middle of a 150 kilometer across methane plume, you see methane as far as the eye can see in every direction, and then you take a breath and you die. So the observations have to be made with satellites, 150 kilometers across. That's a lot of methane coming out of the Arctic Ocean. Based on this one self-reinforcing feedback loop, one of 47 that I know about. Based on that one, Paul Beckwith, climate scientist at the University of Ottawa in Canada, concludes that we can expect a 5 to 6 degree temperature rise in 10 to 20 years. And Beckwith even considers the idea that we could see a 12 degree rise in that same period of time. He bases this conclusion, he says, we are in the early stages of abrupt climate change. He bases the conclusion of 5 to 6 or maybe 12 degrees temperature rise from where we are right now. He bases that on the paleo-ecological and paleoclimatic record. There have been roughly 4 stable states for Earth in the past. Ice Age, roughly 4 or 5 degrees above Ice Age, which is where we are now. 5 or 6 degrees above where we are now, and 11 or 12 degrees above where we are now. The transitions occur remarkably fast from one stage to another, and then they stabilize and remain at that stage for tens or hundreds of thousands of years. So we don't know why things cool down rapidly. We do have evidence that the event that triggered the last great extinction event on Earth, the 5th great extinction, we're currently in the midst of the 6th great extinction. The one that triggered the 5th great extinction 55 million years ago was a release in methane as a result of volcanic activity in what is now Siberia that produced, according to a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a 5-degree temperature rise in 13 years. So this has happened in the past. And that was without these 47 self-reinforcing feedback loops helping to drive the process even faster. In response, a quote from Farley Mowat, the writer, comes to mind. We're under the gross misconception that we're a good species going somewhere important, and at the last minute we'll change directions and God will smile on us. It's delusion. It's not only delusion, but the last minute was a long time ago. My entire life, the environmental clock has been set at 4 or 5 minutes before midnight. Well, I'm old. You can't have the clock that never moves. The hands have to move, or the clock might be broken. We're not in a situation that the clock is right twice a day, not anymore. If the clock is broken, it's broken. Ever since I was a wee grandchild, I heard that we're going to have to do things differently, or we're in real trouble when the grandkids grow up. I'm pretty much all grown up. In fact, I'm starting to shrink. But we don't need to get into that now, do we? Again, the IPCC has been reporting since 1988 that we have to reduce emissions or we're in real trouble. James Hansen, testifying before Congress, the United States Congress in 1988, concluded that unless we change directions, we're going to end up where we're headed. And that'll be catastrophe. We're there. So I suspect the boundaries, the brackets on habitat for humans on this planet are somewhere between 18 months and about 20 years. We don't see any way to provide habitat for humans beyond that period, given that the temperature rise is occurring so rapidly relative to the ability of plants and native organisms to keep up. Unless you think I'm the only crazy person in this room. Oh wait, I might be the only crazy person in this room, but not on the planet. I'm joined by 14 men and 3 women who also claim that we're headed for human extinction in the not very distant future. These include some biologists like Frank Fenner and Neil Dawes, the anthropologist team, Louise Leakey and her father Richard, geoscientist Malcolm Light, public figure Sir Bob Geldof, public figure philosopher Noam Chomsky, and so on. The list is relatively large and growing. I want to point out just one example from Aaron Sorkin, November of last year. Let's see if I can make this work. It seems pretty inconceivable. This is the part where you jump up and try to save me. You remember that? Help. I broke it, didn't I? I broke the internet. Yes. So this...
So there weren't any hard questions. I'm just going to ask you to expand on the report, pretend you're an expert witness and I'm your lawyer. So there won't...
Okay. So This 4-minute video clip is from an episode of The Newsroom, a program written by Aaron Sorkin. He writes scripts for television. And it's a show called The Newsroom, which airs on HBO. And this episode aired last November. And I think the guy being interviewed sounds a lot like me. But of course he's not nearly as funny as me, but I'll let you be the judge.
So there weren't many hard questions. I'm just going to ask you to expand on the report, pretend you're an expert witness, and I don't know. Sounds good.
Intent.
Stand by camera 1.
That the 450 parts per million will soon be crossed. The question remains, how will we respond?
And joining us now in the studio is Richard Westbrook, Deputy Assistant Administrator of the EPA. Welcome. Thank you. Mr. Westbrook, you've spent most of your professional career as a climate scientist in the public sector.
Yes, 10 years as a supervisory management analyst in the Office of Environmental Information. And before that, I was a program specialist in the EPA's Resource Management Division.
And you have a PhD in climate science from Stanford.
Yes, and another in chemistry with a master's in biology.
Okay. Tell us about the findings of the report that was just released.
The latest measurements taken at Mauna Loa, Hawaii, indicate a CO2 level of 400 parts per million.
Just so we know what we're talking about, if you were a doctor and we were the patient, what's your prognosis? 1,000 years, 2,000 years?
A person has already been born who will die due to catastrophic failure of the planet.
What did he just say?
Okay, can you expand on that?
Sure. The last time there was this much CO2 in the air, the oceans were 80 feet higher than they are now. Two things you should know. Half the world's population lives within 120 miles of an ocean.
And the other?
Humans can't breathe underwater.
You're saying the situation's dying.
Not exactly. Your house is burned to the ground. The situation's done. Your house has already burned to the ground. The situation's over.
So what can we do to reverse this?
Well, there's a lot we can do. 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago now. No.
Can you make an analogy that might help us understand?
Sure. It's as if you're sitting in your car, in your garage, with the engine running and the door closed, and you've slipped into unconsciousness. And that's it.
What if someone comes and opens the door?
You're already dead.
What if the person got there at the time?
Then you'd be sick.
Okay. So now what's the CO2 equivalent of something getting there over time?
Shutting off the car 20 years ago.
You sound like you're saying it's hopeless.
Yeah.
Is that the administration's position or yours?
There isn't a position on this any more than there's a position on the temperature at which water boils.
The administration, let me try to, your administration.
And don't forget I need you to
supports
stretch.
solar, clean coal, nuclear power, raising fuel economy standards, and building a more efficient electrical grid.
Yes. And that would have been great.
Let's see if we can't find a better spin. People are starting their weekends. The report says we can release 565 more gigatons of CO2 without the effects being clear.
It says we can only release 565.
So what if we only release 564?
Well, then we would have a reasonable shot at some form of dystopian post-apocalyptic life. But the carbon dioxide in oil that we've already released is 2,795 gigatons. So
What would all this look like?
well, mass migrations, food and water shortages, spread of deadly disease, endless wildfires, way too many to keep under control. Storms that have the power to level cities, blacken out the sky, and create permanent darkness.
Are you going to get in trouble for saying this publicly?
Who cares?
Mr. Westbrook, we want to inform people, but we don't want to alarm them. Can you give us a reason to be optimistic?
Well, that's the thing. Well, Americans are optimistic by nature. And if we face this problem head on, if we listen to our best scientists and act decisively and passionately, I still don't see any way we can survive.
Okay, Richard Westbrook, Deputy Assistant Administrator of the EPA. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So far from the top right to the bottom left. Jeez. Oh, no, I go up there again. Where do I go? What do I do? There it is. I got it. Don't get up. I've got this. Come on. Go. Go, cursor, go. Go. I got this. Don't get up. Whew. What? Where'd that guy come from? Okay, I'm good. I know this part. I've been through this before. This ain't my first rodeo. Look at me go. Oh, there's Paul again. I should be clear, by the way. Paul Beckwith does not appear on this list. Paul, a laser physicist and engineer, is optimistic by nature. He thinks we'll fix it. Even a 5 to 6 degree temperature rise in a decade, he thinks we'll figure out how to deal with it. He's not a biologist. He doesn't know about habitat for humans and human animals. So we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this one. A conservation biologist on the list, Paul Ehrlich, a renowned conservation biologist, was interviewed by MSNBC in January of this year and reached the conclusion that we're headed for the exit. So the question then arises, now what? Because I'm really a bummer. And so people want to know what to do. I'm reminded of a line by Mark Vonnegut, Kurt Vonnegut's son, who spent some time in what we'll colloquially call an insane asylum. And then when he got out, when he was no longer deemed insane, he went on to receive his medical degree from Harvard Medical School. And between the insane asylum and the other insane asylum, known as Harvard Medical School, Mark Vonnegut was asked, why are we here? And his response to the question was, we are here to help each other through this, whatever this is. And I think that's about right. So now what? Now I get into the stuff that explains why no university will have me speak on campus anymore. Because when a scientist starts talking about things that are not heavily, deeply rooted in scientific evidence, they're deemed crazy. But in fact, I have very good news. Excellent, outstanding, truly astonishing news. We get to die. And that's good news because it means we get to live. Let me put that a different way. We, that's you and me and all other people on the planet, we get, not half, not have to, but get to, we are privileged to have the experience of living. We get to live. Of course, what that means is, as a natural part of life, we all get to die. But the odds against any one of us being here are truly cosmological. We know a lot about DNA. Oh, I'm still on science, by the way. I haven't quite jumped the shark. Whoops. American term means nothing to Europeans. I did that again. So, I haven't gone completely off the rails yet. You know about railroads here. I haven't gone completely off the trestle yet. I'm still on science. The odds against any one of us being here in physical form exceed the odds against you buying one lottery ticket and winning the lottery every week for 10 years. Imagine you buy one lottery ticket every week and you win every week. The odds against this collection of DNA coming together in physical form far exceed that. If I were prone to believing in miracles, and I already admitted I'm a left-brain science type, so I don't, but if I were prone to believing in miracles, I'd think each of us was one. Because it's essentially impossible that we're here. As evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins points out, in the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I that are privileged to be here. Privileged with eyes to see where we are and brains to wonder why. In other words, we get to live. Against all odds, we get to live. It's astonishing, really. And yet, here we are. In light of this information, I don't think anybody's going to reach the end of their life and say, I should have bought more crap. Rather, I suspect almost everybody, and certainly everybody in this room, is going to reach the end of their life and take a few memories into the abyss with them. And those memories will have nothing to do with how many pair of shoes they would have needed to be happy. The thoughts will have nothing to do with, oh, I could have been so happy if I'd have just had that pearl ring that I saw when I was 12. We are driven by this culture to consume material possessions. But what we take with us at the end of the day, at the end of every day, at the end of our lives, are a few memories. And hopefully those memories will have a lot to do with the joy we brought to ourselves and to others, and not so much to do with how many pair of shoes Imelda Park was in, or even us. And this is why no university will have me speak on campus, because I'm talking about things that are unspeakable. What I suggest we do, in the light of this very good news that we all get to die, is that we spend a lot less time worrying about how many pair of shoes we have and whether we got that pearl ring when we were 12, and whether we got that ruby necklace when we were 50, or whether we got a nice engagement ring, and all that other material possession, ownership sort of nonsense. I suggest we pursue two things. We pursue what we love, and we pursue excellence, whatever that means for you. I know what excellence means for me. It means asking uncomfortable questions. Like, why are we here? Why am I here? What is it about civilization that is at the root of the utter catastrophe we find ourselves in? That's just me. For you, excellence might have to do with gardening, or working in hospice, or pursuing knowledge about some particular field of study, or helping terminate industrial civilization on behalf of non-human species. I don't know what a life of excellence means for you, but I would encourage you to pursue it no matter how much time we have. Similarly for love. People, you know how people are at parties. Trust me, you know a lot more about it than I do. So people come up to you at a party, they introduce themselves. What's the first thing they say? Almost always.
What are you doing?
Yes. What do you do? What are you doing? And what do they mean by that? They mean, how do you make money? Because money is the most important thing in the entire universe, obviously, since it came into being a few thousand years ago. For the first 2.8 million years of the human experience, we had no such thing as money, but now it's everything. So if somebody comes up and they ask you, what do you do? Or what are you doing? And what they mean is, how do you make money? And of course, the more money you make, the better you are. The more successful you are as a human being. Oh, you're a banker. You must make a lot of money. You must be important. So, interestingly, the people in positions of power who make the most money are the ones who are most responsible for the ongoing destruction. We worship them. Nobody worships the permaculture gardener who barely makes enough money to survive and grows most of her own food. That seems sort of beneath us, getting dirt under your fingernails and all that sort of thing. John Rawls Ralston Saul published his book, Voltaire's Bastards, in 1992. 1992, 23 years ago, and in it, he wrote, "Never has failure been so ardently defended as success." We love money. We claim that the love of money is the root of all evil, but we really pretty much worship people who have a lot of money. If that isn't the love of money, I don't know what is. So, when those people meet me at parties, and yes, I still go to parties. There's been a lot of rumors about this on the internet. I'm here to dispel those right now. I've been to parties recently, like within the last 2 decades. When somebody comes up to me and asks me what I do, I tell them all kinds of wild stories, most of them true. I tell them that I live on a homestead, that I left my high-paying, extremely successful life as a university professor where I wasn't expected to do any work. And now I don't make any money at all, but I grow plants in my garden, and I have an orchard, and I milk goats, and occasionally I go out and speak, and I tell people they're going to die sooner than they thought. And this whole time, the person I'm talking to is going like this. They're just backing away from me. And then I ask the clincher, "What do you love?" And they run out of the room as if their hair is on fire. I can empty a room, I can suck all the air out of a room and make all the people leave in about 10 seconds. It's really my most impressive talent. What do you love? Find what you love. Find what you're passionate about. Pursue excellence in love. How could that possibly be wrong? Occasionally I get this question, what if he's wrong? More frequently it is not posed as a question, and it doesn't have a question mark at the end, it has an exclamation mark, and it's just 2 words, he's wrong. So if you go on the internet, you can see all kinds of things I'm wrong about. And it could be. It could be. By the way, it's not me, I'm just citing other people's work. I left active service at the University of Arizona 6 years ago, so I'm not collecting any primary data. So what I'm doing instead is what's called secondary research. I'm accumulating the research of others, putting it together into a nice little package, and pointing out that as a biologist, I think our habitat is going away soon. So it could be that I'm wrong. It could be that all the science I cite is wrong. It could be that global change scientists are paid by big corporations to lie about how bad the situation is. The Koch brothers might in fact be right, and that the climate scientists are all liars, paid too radical. I still have good news. We still get to die. I can only guarantee 2 things. You're going to die, and our species is going to go extinct. The same applies for every individual, and it always has. The same applies for every species, and it always has. Soak that in. But we have this amazing technology now. You can take a device that fits in the palm of your hand and go almost anywhere and conduct 15 seconds of research on a device that has more computing power than a supercomputer that filled this room 20 years ago. And you can type in a couple of questions at your favorite search engine and find out that a phrase from Derrick Jensen comes to mind, the environmental writer. You can find out 2 things. Derrick Jensen says this all the time. Life is really, really wonderful, and we're totally fucked. You can find out that you're a cosmological miracle, that the odds against you being here are truly astronomical, that it's essentially impossible for any of us to show up at any point in human history, and not only that, but you get to be here at the most interesting time. Everybody else left the movie before it was over, and you get to be here at the end. That's awesome. That's incredible. You're a miracle. You're everything. You're stardust. You're sentient. You have in your hand a device that allows you to find out incredible information about how unbelievable that it is that you're here at all. And then in the next 15 seconds, you can find out that you're really nothing. The 13.8 billion years of the universe couldn't care less about you. That you're just another member of another species that's going to die, you're going to die, and that the species is going to go extinct, and that you're one of millions that has done so. You're a speck on a speck on a speck, and the universe doesn't care about you. You're everything. You're a miracle. You're nothing. You don't count. Nobody cares. Our brains are really big and really powerful, and we can hold both of those thoughts in our head at the same time. No matter how long you have, I guarantee you one more thing. It's going to seem short. About 6 weeks ago, the world's oldest human turned 117 years. She had her 117th birthday. And when asked to ponder the first 117 years of her life, she said, and I quote, "It seemed rather short." 117. It seemed rather short. So, you get to die, which means you get to live, and it will seem rather short. How are you going to spend that little tiny bit of time you have on this most wondrous of planets? Are you going to spend it pursuing money? Are you going to spend it pursuing love? Are you going to spend it pursuing what everybody else does on the hamster wheel of civilization? Are you going to spend it pursuing excellence, whatever that means to you? Oh, full disclosure, I should point out that 2 weeks ago she died. So see? Birth is lethal. Nobody gets out alive. Even if you live to be almost forever. It will seem rather short. If you want more, and how could you not? You can read my latest book, co-authored with Carolyn Baker. There are a few copies here that will be sold for 20 euros, I believe, and I'll sign a copy if you'd like. Or you can get the version that is filled with data here on my website. So this has my contribution in this co-authored book, most of it. But in addition to this essay, there's a whole lot of other things Carolyn and I write about that have to do with the subtitle of the book, How to Live with Death in Mind. Birth is lethal. How are you going to spend your days? Are you going to spend it helping others through this, whatever this is? Are you going to spend it as if we're in hospice? Are you going to spend it as if life is urgent, because it is? How are you going to spend your days? You might want to think about that. I should point out that the subtitle is actually How to Live with Death in Mind. Contrary to what you're going to find out on the internet if you do a little further study of me, the subtitle is not How to Die Miserably because you heard Guy McPherson speak. I have to check every time. Nope, that's not what it says. Carol and I encourage living in light of the fact that our life is short. In light of the fact that we don't have to be bound by the straitjacket of culture. We don't have to do what's expected of us. In fact, once you realize that your life is short, you might realize that what you love is more important than getting on the treadmill that is civilization. I could go on and on, as some of you know. But I'll stop right there, because I'd rather have a conversation with you than continue to blah, blah, blah at you. So I'd be ecstatic to respond to any of your questions or comments. Answers are especially welcome at this time. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming, and let's have a little discussion now, if you don't mind.